Female CEO in a wheelchair sat alone at the wedding, until a single dad asked, "Will you be my date?" Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The sound of laughter and music floated through the evening air. Crystal lights shimmered across the grand ballroom of the Lakeview estate, turning every glass and silver fork into tiny stars. Guests in silk gowns and tailored suits toasted to love, to forever, to everything that seemed far away from Evelyn Hart's quiet corner. She sat at the far edge of the room, her silver wheelchair gleaming softly under the chandelier. The lace of her pale blue dress pooled neatly at her feet, hiding the motionless legs she had spent months trying not to think about. Around her, conversations buzzed like bees, but no one looked her way. They whispered her name, though. Evelyn Hart, Chief Executive Officer of Hart Group, the woman who built a medical empire before 35, the same woman who lost everything in a single night when her car spun off the highway and broke more than just her bones. Her champagne sat untouched. She told herself she was only here because the bride had been her college roommate, one of the few people who still called her Eve instead of ma'am. But as the laughter rose, Evelyn felt smaller. The hall blurred, and for a moment she wished she had stayed home where silence did not stare back. Across the room, a man in a simple black vest carried a tray of empty glasses. His hair was dark, his sleeves rolled up, the kind of face you would not notice twice unless you watched closely. His name was Daniel Cooper, a single father who took extra shifts whenever his daughter fell ill or needed new shoes. Tonight was another long night. He had been serving since 5 o'clock and was counting the hours until midnight. When he noticed her sitting alone, something in him paused. Every other guest was paired, laughing, busy capturing the night on their phones. She was the only one who seemed apart from it, like a beautiful painting placed in the wrong gallery. Daniel set his tray down and hesitated. Maybe it was none of his business. Maybe she wanted to be left alone. But then the band began to play a slow song, and her eyes flickered toward the dance floor longing, just for a heartbeat. That was enough. He walked toward her, his shoes soft against the marble floor. Evelyn looked up, startled. No one ever approached her first. He smiled, not the polite kind people gave out of pity, but the easy kind that came from kindness. "You know," he said gently, "a wedding is a terrible place to sit alone. Would you mind if I joined you?" Evelyn blinked, unsure if he was serious. "You work here," she said quietly. "You do not have to entertain me." "I know," Daniel replied, leaning slightly, lowering his voice. "But maybe I want to." For a moment, the music filled the silence between them. She saw no pity in his eyes, only warmth, steady, human, unafraid. Then, to her surprise, he asked with an almost playful tone, "How about being my date for the next 5 minutes? I promise it will be the cheapest one you have ever had." A small laugh slipped from her lips before she could stop it. It was the first real laugh she had let out since the accident. Around them, the world kept spinning, the bride twirling, the guests cheering, but for Evelyn, time slowed. In that single act of kindness, from a man who knew nothing about her name or her past, something quiet and unfamiliar began to stir inside her. For the first time in months, she did not feel invisible. She felt seen. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Evelyn Hart's apartment overlooking downtown Seattle. The city below was waking up, horns echoing faintly from the streets. On the marble counter sat the single flower Daniel had given her the night before. She had brought it home without realizing, the petals still damp from the evening rain. Evelyn looked at it while stirring her coffee, wondering why a stranger's kindness lingered longer than the polite words of her business partners. The night replayed in her mind the laughter, his steady eyes, his voice when he said she deserved not to be alone. It was strange, almost ridiculous, that something so small could shake her carefully built walls. Her phone buzzed. A message from her physical therapist reminded her of the morning session. Evelyn sighed, finished her coffee, and wheeled herself toward the door. Every movement was deliberate now. The accident 8 months ago had crushed her spine and changed everything: the way she worked, the way she was seen, the way she saw herself. She once ran a corporation that produced advanced rehabilitation equipment. Now she was one of its patients. At the Heart Rehabilitation Center, the air was filled with the sterile scent of disinfectant and hope. Nurses in light blue uniforms moved quietly between rooms. Her therapist, Dr. Irene Foster, greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, Evelyn. How are we feeling today?" "Like gravity still hates me," Evelyn replied, managing a faint smile. They began the routine, the stretches, the weight shifts, the endless repetitions that once made her cry in frustration. Every session was a battle between body and will. Today, her arms trembled halfway through the transfer from chair to standing frame. Sweat gathered at her temples. "Breathe," Dr. Foster said softly. "Small victories count." Evelyn clenched her jaw, lifting again. Her hands gripped the rail until her muscles burned. For a second, her legs bore a fraction of her weight. Then, just as quickly, they gave out. She sat back hard, her chest rising and falling. "I used to close mergers worth millions," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Now I cannot even stand for 5 seconds." Dr. Foster knelt beside her. "You are learning to walk again, Evelyn. You are not losing. You are healing." That word healing lingered in her ears long after the session ended. Later that afternoon, she returned home exhausted. Rain had started again, painting the skyline gray. As she rolled into her living room, she saw the flower still on the counter. Its petals had begun to wilt. She reached for a small glass and filled it with water, setting the stem inside carefully, almost tenderly. A soft knock startled her. When she opened the door, Daniel stood there, holding an umbrella and looking slightly embarrassed. "Hi," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I hope I am not interrupting. You left this in my truck last night." He held up a silver bracelet, hers, the one engraved with the words, "Still I Rise." Evelyn's breath caught. "You came all this way to return it?" Daniel shrugged. "You dropped something special. I figured it deserved a safe trip home." Rain pattered behind him, steady and rhythmic. She invited him inside, grateful for company that did not look at her with pity. They talked about small things, his daughter Lily, her favorite coffee place, the city's unpredictable weather. His words were ordinary, but the way he listened was not. When he stood to leave, she said quietly, "Thank you, Daniel, for treating me like a person last night." He looked at her, serious but gentle. "That is what you are, Evelyn. A person. Not a headline, not a wheelchair, not a tragedy." For a moment, she could not speak. When the door closed, the apartment felt strangely bright. That night, as the city lights blinked outside her window, Evelyn opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keys before she began typing the first page of a new proposal, a program to expand rehabilitation access for patients who could not afford it. She titled it Project Bloom, the same name she silently gave to the flower Daniel had given her, the one now standing upright again, against all odds. The following week, the rain in Seattle softened into a light drizzle, the kind that painted the city in silver and calm. Evelyn Hart's apartment smelled faintly of jasmine tea and determination. Her days had settled into a careful rhythm therapy in the morning, board meetings by video call in the afternoon, and long quiet evenings spent revising her proposal for Project Bloom. Yet, somewhere between those routines, her thoughts often drifted back to Daniel Cooper. She had met countless people since her accident. Investors, doctors, well-meaning friends. But no one had spoken to her the way he did, without hesitation or pity. His words replayed in her mind. "You are a person, not a tragedy." They were simple, but they stuck deeper than any medical advice. That Thursday, as she reviewed a new design for a lightweight wheelchair, a small knock echoed through the apartment. When she opened the door, Daniel stood there again, this time holding a paper bag that smelled of roasted coffee and fresh muffins. His smile was shy, uncertain. "I had a delivery near here," he said, "and I remembered you mentioned the bakery on Fifth Avenue. They had your favorite, blueberry crumble." Evelyn blinked, surprised by his thoughtfulness. "You remembered that?" "I have a good memory for small things," he replied with a shrug. "It helps when you are raising a kid." Oh, he set the bag on the counter and looked around the apartment clean, minimalist, but almost too quiet. On a side table sat the flower he had given her. The petals were open now, pale purple under the morning light. "You kept it," he said softly. "I guess I did," Evelyn answered. It reminded me that some things still stand tall, even when they are broken. Daniel smiled at that. You should meet Lily sometime. My daughter. She says flowers are brave because they bloom even when nobody's watching. Something in Evelyn's chest warmed. She had not spoken to a child since her accident, too afraid of the questions their honesty might bring. But the sincerity in his voice made it sound less like an invitation and more like a promise that the world could still be kind. Later that week, she accepted his invitation. The sun peeked through the clouds as she arrived at the small community park where Daniel and Lily waited. Lily was 7 years old, bright-eyed, with a messy ponytail and a purple backpack covered in stickers. When she saw Evelyn's wheelchair, she smiled without hesitation. Daddy said you are super strong, Lily said. Are you really? Evelyn laughed softly. I am trying to be. No, that counts, the little girl replied, offering a stick figure standing beside a flower, both smiling. At the bottom, in bright crayon letters, it said Miss Evelyn and the Brave Flower. The gesture caught Evelyn completely off guard. Her throat tightened as she thanked the child. For the first time in months, she felt no wall between herself and the rest of the world. Over the next few days, Daniel and Lily became an unexpected part of her routine. They stopped by after school to bring coffee, sometimes to help her with errands, sometimes just to talk. They never treated her like a patient. They treated her like family. One evening, Daniel invited her to the community center where Lily took dance lessons. Evelyn hesitated but agreed. Inside, laughter filled the space as children twirled in imperfect circles. She watched from her wheelchair near the window, her heart both aching and healing. Daniel stood beside her. Lily says she wants to dedicate her next dance to you, he said quietly. Evelyn turned, surprised. Why me? He looked at her with steady eyes. Because she says you are the first grown-up she has met who does not give up. Outside, the rain started again, tapping softly against the glass. Evelyn looked at her reflection, the wheelchair, the scars, the traces of pain, and for the first time, she saw something else too. Strength, hope, a spark of life she thought she had lost. When she returned home that night, she opened her journal and wrote one sentence beneath the words Project Bloom. Healing does not happen alone. It begins when someone chooses to care. As she set the pen down, she glanced at the flower on her table. The petals had begun to fall, but the stem remained upright. Somehow, it looked even more beautiful that way. A month later, the rhythm of Evelyn Hart's life had changed in quiet, steady ways. Her mornings still began with therapy, but now she looked forward to them. Every small movement felt like a victory. Every bead of sweat, a step toward the woman she used to be. Daniel Cooper and his daughter Lily often stopped by after school, bringing stories, drawings, and laughter that filled the silence of her apartment. The bond between them grew naturally, like sunlight creeping through half-closed blinds. Daniel never mentioned her wealth or her position as chief executive officer. To him, she was simply Evelyn, the woman who smiled at his daughter and asked about her day. It was a kind of healing she had not expected, one that went beyond medicine. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel helped wheel her through the city park. The sky was pale blue, and the air smelled of wet grass. Lily ran ahead chasing pigeons, her laughter echoing between the trees. Evelyn watched her with a soft smile. She is fearless, Evelyn said. Daniel nodded. She gets that from her mother. She used to dance in the rain without an umbrella. I could never stop her. Evelyn glanced at him. You still wear your wedding ring. He looked down at his hand. It reminds me not of loss, but of love that taught me how to stay kind. They walked in silence for a moment, the squeak of her wheelchair mixing with the wind. Evelyn finally spoke. You know, I used to think strength meant never asking for help. Now I think it means allowing someone to stand beside you when you cannot stand on your own. Daniel looked at her with that steady gaze that never pitied. Maybe that is the only kind of strength that matters. That evening, as he helped her back to her apartment, rain began to fall again, light, almost playful. Daniel hesitated by the door. Do you want to see something? He asked. She nodded. He guided her outside to the small rooftop garden of her building. Rain misted the air, and the city lights shimmered below. The scent of wet earth filled her lungs. Daniel opened a small umbrella, held it over them both, and whispered, I come up here sometimes when things feel heavy. It reminds me that storms can be gentle too. Evelyn tilted her head. letting a drop of rain touch her cheek. It felt cool and alive. "You make it sound like rain has a heart." "Maybe it does," he said. "Maybe it is the sky's way of reminding us that everything living needs to fall before it can rise again." Something inside her softened. The rain blurred the world around them, leaving only two silhouettes, a man and a woman who had both lost and kept going. When Daniel turned toward her, their eyes met, and the air felt heavier, but not uncomfortable. "I am glad I met you, Evelyn," he said quietly. She smiled, her voice barely above the rain. "Me too, Daniel." The next morning, Evelyn woke up with a strange lightness in her chest. She dressed carefully and went to the rehabilitation center earlier than usual. Her therapist, Dr. Foster, noticed the change. "You look different today," she said. "Maybe I am starting to feel alive again," Evelyn replied. The session was harder than ever. Her arms trembled as she pushed against the bars, her breath coming fast. Yet this time, she did not give up. The memory of Daniel's words echoed in her mind. "Maybe that is the only kind of strength that matters." Dr. Foster's voice broke through her focus. "Evelyn, look!" She had not realized it, but she was standing not for a second or two, but long enough to take one small, careful step. Tears blurred her vision. The room erupted in quiet applause from the nearby nurses. When she finally sat down, Dr. Foster smiled. "You just took your first step." Evelyn wiped her tears. "It was not just me," she whispered. "Someone reminded me why I should keep trying." That night, she wrote a message to Daniel. "I walked today. Only one step, but it felt like a mile." He replied minutes later, "I knew you would. Lily says we should celebrate with cake." Evelyn laughed aloud. For the first time in months, her laughter did not sound like an echo. It sounded real, full, alive. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky cleared, revealing a faint moon over the city. She looked out the window and smiled at the flower on her table, its petals fading, its stem still standing tall, like a promise that healing was already underway. 2 weeks later, Evelyn Hart's progress had become the quiet miracle of the rehabilitation center. Each morning she arrived earlier, her determination steady as the sunrise. Her arms were stronger, her posture straighter, and her will unshakable. The staff admired her, but Evelyn rarely spoke of her motivation. They did not know about the man and the little girl who had somehow breathed light back into her days. Every evening after therapy, Daniel Cooper and Lily would stop by the center. They brought coffee, laughter, and stories from the outside world. Lily's favorite routine was showing Evelyn a new dance move each visit, twirling until she got dizzy and fell into giggles. Evelyn would laugh too, clapping her hands while Daniel watched from the doorway, his expression soft and proud. That Tuesday afternoon, Evelyn was practicing with parallel bars when Daniel arrived earlier than usual. He stood near the door, quietly watching her shift her weight from one leg to the other. Her focus was sharp, her face pale with effort. Then, slowly, she lifted her right foot and took a single step. The sound of her heel touching the ground was small, but it felt enormous. She exhaled sharply, gripping the bar. "I did it," she whispered. Daniel's voice broke the silence. "You did." "When?" She turned, startled to see him there. For a second, neither spoke. Then he walked closer, holding a thermos. "Celebration coffee," he said, smiling. "Lily insisted." Evelyn's lips curved into a shy grin. "She is quite the little cheerleader." "She believes in people," Daniel said. "She gets that from her mom." Evelyn's eyes softened. "And you?" He shrugged lightly. "I just try not to let the world harden her." They sat outside on the center's small terrace, sipping warm coffee while the afternoon sun painted the sky in soft gold. Evelyn could hear the faint hum of traffic and the rhythmic beating of her own heart. For once, she was not thinking about the pain or the work still ahead. She was simply there, present, alive. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "You know, when I first saw you at that wedding, I almost did not walk over. You looked like someone who did not want to be bothered." She smiled faintly. "You were right. I did not. Then why did you let me stay?" Evelyn thought for a moment. "Because you did not look at me like everyone else. You did not see a chair. You saw a person." He nodded slowly, eyes meeting hers. "I'm glad I did." A comfortable silence settled between them. The wind brushed through her hair, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden below. She caught Daniel glancing at her once, then quickly looking away. There was something in his expression, respect, warmth, and something deeper he seemed afraid to name. That night, Evelyn dreamed for the first time in months. She was walking through a meadow, sunlight on her face, her steps steady and free. She woke up smiling, her chest full of something that felt dangerously close to hope. The next day, during her session, Dr. Foster noticed the change in her posture. "Someone is looking stronger this morning," she teased. "Maybe it is the coffee," Evelyn replied with a laugh. But deep down, she knew it was not just the coffee. It was the laughter of a child. It was a man who refused to let her disappear into her own silence. That evening, Daniel invited her and Lily to a community fundraiser at the same park where they first spent time together. The theme was Rise Again, organized to support families of accident survivors. Evelyn hesitated but agreed, deciding it was time to rejoin the world. The park was strung with warm lights, and music drifted through the crisp air. When she arrived, people greeted her politely, some recognizing her face from old news articles. Daniel stayed close, introducing her to his friends as if she were simply another neighbor, not the wealthy chief executive officer who had once made headlines. Lily ran up with 2 small cups of lemonade. "Miss Evelyn, come dance with me." Evelyn smiled. "I cannot dance yet, sweetheart." Then we can sway in the chair," Lily said with a grin. "That still counts." Daniel chuckled. "You heard the boss." He took Evelyn's hand lightly, careful not to overstep, and together they swayed to the slow rhythm under the strings of light. It was not a grand dance. It was a quiet one, 2 people, one learning to walk again and one learning to love again. When the song ended, Daniel whispered, "You are doing better than you think, Evelyn." She looked up at him, her voice steady. "Maybe so, or maybe I just have good company." That night, after they dropped her off, Evelyn wheeled herself to the window and looked out at the glowing city. She placed the small flower Daniel had given her on the sill. Its petals had faded, but it still stood upright. She smiled, whispering to herself, "Bloom again." It was the phrase she had started saying every night, a promise, not to the world, but to herself. The following morning, Evelyn Hart woke to a string of unread messages from her assistant. The headlines were already spreading across business networks. Hart Group Chief Executive Officer returns after 8 months of recovery. The news had leaked before she was ready. Her quiet life of therapy and peace shattered overnight. By noon, reporters crowded outside her building. Cameras flashed, questions flew. Daniel Cooper happened to arrive just as she tried to leave for therapy. He stepped in front of her wheelchair, shielding her from the noise. "Let us get you through this," he said firmly, guiding her toward his truck. Inside the vehicle, Evelyn's hands trembled. "I did not want them to see me like this. Not yet." Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "They will see what I see, someone who fought her way back." But deep down, Evelyn knew the world did not see her that way. They saw a weakened leader, a symbol of tragedy wrapped in luxury. The thought cut deeper than she expected. Later that day, during a board meeting at Hart Group headquarters, her chief financial officer, Mark Ellison, smiled too politely. "Welcome back, Evelyn. The media response has been dramatic. Perhaps it is best you keep a low profile while we handle public relations." Something in his tone felt off, smooth, controlled, almost condescending. Evelyn met his gaze. "Thank you, Mark. I will decide what is best for my company." After the meeting, she overheard 2 executives whispering in the hall. "Poor woman. She is in no condition to lead." The words struck like a blade. For the first time in months, Evelyn felt the old ache of helplessness creeping back. That night, she called Daniel. "Maybe they are right," she said quietly. "Maybe I am not the person I used to be." His voice on the other end was calm but firm. "Good, because the person you used to be worked non-stop until the world broke her. The person you are now is learning how to live again." Evelyn closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. But even as comfort spread through her, something darker stirred beneath it, a suspicion she could not yet name. Mark's smile, the timing of the leak, the way the press had known exactly where to find her. It was too perfect, too planned. Outside her window, the rain returned, steady and unending. For the first time since the accident, Evelyn felt the faint chill of fear again, a whisper that her story of healing was about to face its first real test. 2 days later, Evelyn Hart arrived at Hart Group headquarters under a sky the color of steel. She had spent the night reading through reports, tracing the source of the leaked story. The more she looked, the clearer it became the information had come from inside the company. Only 3 people had access to those documents, and one of them was Mark Ellison. When she entered the boardroom, Mark was already there, standing by the window with that same polite smile. "Evelyn," he greeted smoothly, "I hope you are feeling better." "I am," she replied, her tone measured. "But I am curious. How did the press know the exact date of my return? Only the internal memo had that detail." Mark's expression did not change. "Reporters have their ways. You know how leaks work." "No." Her jaw tightened. "Yes, I do." That evening, as she left the building, rain began to fall. The security guard helped her into her car. Just as she was about to close the door, a familiar voice called out, "Evelyn, wait." Daniel Cooper was running across the street, holding an umbrella. His shirt was damp, his breath uneven. "You did not answer my messages. I was worried." She looked at him, weary but grateful. "It has been a long day." He crouched beside her car, lowering his voice. "You think someone inside your company is trying to hurt you, do you not?" Her eyes widened slightly. "How did you know?" "I stopped by the community center earlier," he said. "One of your company's drivers was there. He said people have been whispering that the accident 8 months ago was not really an accident." Evelyn froze. What did he mean? Daniel shook his head. He did not say more, but he looked scared. The sound of rain filled the silence between them. Evelyn's hands tightened on the edge of her wheelchair. "If that is true, then someone wanted me gone, and now they are trying again." Daniel's voice was low but steady. "Then we will find out who it is." That night, Evelyn could not sleep. She sat by the window, watching the city lights blur in the rain. Her body still ached from therapy. But the pain that kept her awake came from somewhere deeper. She thought about everything she had survived, the crash, the recovery, the loneliness, and now the possibility that it had all been caused by someone she trusted. The next morning, she went to the hospital to review her medical files. The attending nurse hesitated before handing them over. Inside, a page was missing the police report that had documented the brake failure. Evelyn's heart sank. Someone had erased the evidence. By evening, she met Daniel at a Kiet cafe. He brought his laptop, showing her an email he had found through a contact at the transportation department. It was a maintenance record, dated the day before the accident, signed by Mark Ellison himself. Evelyn stared at the screen, her breath catching. The truth hit her like cold air. "He did it," she whispered. "He wanted control of the company." Daniel reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Then it is time to take it back." Outside, thunder rolled through the sky. For the first time in months, Evelyn felt the familiar fire of the woman she once was, not the patient, not the victim, but the leader who would fight for justice. The next morning, Evelyn Hart walked into Hart Group headquarters with quiet resolve. The automatic doors slid open, reflecting her determined face in their glass panels. She had spent the night gathering every piece of evidence Daniel Cooper could find. Her hands still shook when she thought about the truth, but her voice would not. She entered the boardroom while the directors were already seated. Mark Ellison looked surprised to see her. "Evelyn," he said smoothly, "we were not expecting—" "You never do expect the people you try to destroy to walk back in," she interrupted calmly. "I am here to finish what you started." The room fell silent. Evelyn placed a folder on the table. "This is the maintenance record you signed the day before my crash. You authorized a brake inspection that never happened, and here is the payment order made to a company that does not exist. Would you like to explain that, Mark?" Mark's confident expression wavered. "This is absurd. You cannot prove—" "I can," she said, opening another file. "The transportation department confirmed your signature. I also have a copy of the missing police report you tried to delete." The directors exchanged uneasy glances. Mark took a step back, his voice rising. "You think anyone will believe you? You can barely stand." Evelyn straightened in her wheelchair, her eyes steady. "Then they will listen to my words." At that moment, 2 uniformed officers entered the room. Daniel followed behind them, holding his phone. "We already sent the files to the police," he said. "They match the investigation opened 8 months ago." Mark's face drained of color. "You set me up," he shouted. But the officers were already moving forward. "You set yourself up," Evelyn replied quietly. "When you decided greed mattered more than life." The officers led Mark away as the boardroom filled with murmurs. One of the senior directors turned to Evelyn. "Miss Hart, we are deeply sorry. None of us knew." Evelyn raised her hand. "This company was built on innovation and compassion. Somewhere along the way we forgot both. That changes today." "No." The meeting ended with applause, subdued but sincere. When Evelyn and Daniel stepped outside, the afternoon light bathed the city in gold. The air smelled of rain but carried warmth instead of cold. Daniel looked at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You just took down a man who tried to kill you. How do you feel?" She let out a slow breath. "Alive, finally alive." They drove to the community center, where Lily was waiting. The little girl ran to greet them, holding a small bouquet of daisies. "Daddy said we are celebrating." Evelyn laughed softly. "We are. Today is about justice and new beginnings." As they walked inside, the walls were covered with hand-painted posters that read "Rise Again." Volunteers cheered when they saw her. Daniel helped her to the small stage where she had been asked to speak. She took the microphone, her hands steady. "Healing," she said, "is not the absence of pain. It is the courage to keep moving through it. 8 months ago, I thought my story had ended. But people who believed in kindness taught me that healing is not a solitary act. It is something we do together." The crowd applauded, their faces glowing with admiration. Daniel and Lily stood in the front row, smiling proudly. Evelyn met Daniel's gaze, and for a moment, the world felt still. She ended her speech with a simple promise. "From this day forward, Heart Group will fund the Bloom Foundation, a program dedicated to helping those who fight to walk again just as I did." When she finished, the audience rose to their feet. The sound of clapping filled the hall like thunder. Evelyn smiled through her tears, realizing that justice had not only cleared her past, it had also opened her heart to the life waiting beyond it. A year later, spring returned to Seattle with the kind of sunlight that made the city shimmer. The Bloom Foundation had become one of the most respected rehabilitation programs in the country. Every week, survivors came to learn to walk again, not just with machines, but with hope. Evelyn Hart's name was no longer whispered as a symbol of tragedy. It was spoken as proof that strength could bloom after disaster. That morning, the community garden outside the foundation was filled with laughter. Volunteers planted new flowers to mark the 1-year anniversary of its opening. Daniel Cooper stood near the gate, holding a small bouquet of lilies. Lily ran ahead of him, waving at everyone. "Daddy, Miss Evelyn is here," she shouted. Evelyn rolled across the courtyard, her smile bright against the morning light. She wore a soft cream dress, and, beside her chair, a pair of silver crutches leaned within reach. She no longer needed them every day, but she carried them proudly reminders of the journey that had brought her here. Lily rushed to hug her. "You promised to dance with me today." Evelyn laughed gently. "Then I suppose we had better keep that promise." Daniel handed her the lilies. "Congratulations, Evelyn. 1 year of bloom." She looked at the flowers, then at him. "It was never just me. You and Lily are part of this garden too." They walked together toward the small stage set up under the cherry trees. Evelyn gave a short speech, thanking the staff, the patients, and the families who had supported them. Her voice was calm but full of emotion. "When I was in that hospital bed, I thought my life had ended. But healing taught me something. Love does not erase pain, it transforms it. Every scar is proof that we fought to stay alive." The crowd applauded warmly. Daniel stepped beside her, his eyes shining. "You still make people believe in miracles," he said softly. Evelyn turned toward him, smiling. "Maybe because I still believe in them too." "Oh." Then, to everyone's surprise, Daniel knelt on one knee. From his pocket, he took out a small box. Inside was a silver ring, engraved with the words, "Bloom Again." Lily gasped. "Daddy, you are really doing it." The audience laughed and clapped. Daniel's voice trembled slightly. "Evelyn Hart, you have taught me what real strength looks like. You healed more than your body. You healed my faith in life. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes. For a moment, she could not speak. Then she whispered, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The crowd erupted in applause. Lily hugged them both as petals drifted down from the cherry trees. Evelyn looked up at the sky, sunlight glinting on her ring, and felt a peace she had never known before. Later that evening, as the celebration faded and the lights dimmed, Evelyn stood at the edge of the garden. She leaned slightly on her crutches and took one careful step forward, then another. The path beneath her feet was solid, real, alive. Daniel joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You are walking again," he said softly. She smiled through happy tears. "I told you. Bloom again." The camera of life pulled back in her mind, the woman who once sat alone at a wedding now surrounded by laughter, love, and light. Her story was no longer about survival. It was about rebirth. And as the sun sank behind the city, Evelyn whispered to herself, "Healing is not the end of pain. It is the beginning of forever."